Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, I am excited to introduce you to author Evelyn Puerto with The Sting of the Scorpion, and you're gonna love it. How are you today, Evelyn?
I'm great, Denise Marie. How are you?
I'm good. You look so sweet, and you're from South Carolina. And this was brutal. How did you come up with this?
You know, I'm really not sure. I guess my other books had been more positive character arcs, and I decided I wanted to try somebody that was on a bad path. And it just went from there.
You know, it was really good the way that the omelets involved with the scorpions kind of drain them when they use them.
Mm-hmm.
So give us a little background about the whole storyline and the war between clans going on without giving away the whole story. But
okay. My heroine, Demira, lives in a land that has been involved in this endless war for centuries. There's basically 4 different countries that have been fighting, and they've all, over time, disintegrated into these war bands that are just constantly fighting each other. And one day, her entire clan, is wiped out by a war band, except for her and her brother and a friend, and then another man and his son. So the 5 of them are left. They take care of the dead, and then they have to make a choice. And this man decides to take his son to the nearest warlord to ask for protection in exchange for his servitude. The other 3 decide, we don't want to do that. We don't want to be pawns. So they try a different approach. Doesn't work out. They end up with the warlord. Well, that warlord is named Iktul. Well, one day another warlord comes against Iktul's army and wipes him out because this other warlord has a magic amulet. And when the army is wiped out, Demira and her brother and friend decide, we're out of here. And they flee, but Demira is really taken with this idea of a magic amulet that gives power because she has been feeling so powerless. She saw her family get wiped out. She feels like a pawn. And if she has power, she won't have to be afraid. And then she gets the idea she could be the one to stop the war. Well, an opportunity comes up later for her to use these amulets, and she's all over that. But her brother sees, a lot sooner than she does, that the power behind these amulets might not be very benign. And he doesn't, anyway, she doesn't want to go, she wants to go for the amulets and the power, and he's trying to stop her, and what will happen?
I don't know. It was so well done. So
thank you.
I love the endless war. I love the whole social issue between freedom or servitude, the way that all played out. It was really well done. So with the clans, though, were there any world history or current history that might have influenced how you built that world?
Yes, there was. Wow, you put the question in a way I'm not used to thinking about it. Some of what we've been seeing lately with COVID lockdowns, that kind of influenced it retrospectively. I was well into editing by the time that came up. And I thought, wow, this is really reflecting our society of what are we willing to do to be safe, or safety versus freedom, that whole question. I also thought about Central Asia. I had traveled to Central Asia years ago, and some of the wars and just the different tribal groups that came in and conquered a piece of land, and then somebody else conquered it over and over and over. And that kind of was a springboard for where I started building the world.
All right. So what is your experience with horses that help influences? Because horses played a big part in this. And actually, there was a couple of questions. Can you really drink the blood of a horse?
Actually, yes, that was something I took from world history. I based that culture loosely on the Kazakhs and the Mongols. And
Hmm.
Genghis Khan and his Mongols, they were known to be able to travel immense distances very quickly. And they did. If they ran out of food, they would drink the blood of their horses. And that would sustain them if they didn't have food or water. They could do that for a few days before obviously the horse was too weak.
Oh, wow. That's so weird. Okay. But you had a lot of weird things like that that had me looking it up. Is that real? Wow. All right. And then seeking power for the for safety,
Mhm.
and the whole power behind inanimate objects, and that in the universe everything has kind of balance.
Mhm.
So I loved how you played that out. Do you have what's your background for before you were a writer?
For me as a writer,
Before a writer.
oh, before a writer, well, I didn't plan on being a writer. I loved to read. I loved fairy tales, the Green Fairy Book, the Blue Fairy Book, all of them, and Narnia and Lord of the Rings and all that. But I really had no intentions of writing. And I was even offered a writing scholarship on the basis of a poem I wrote in high school. And I turned that down. I was not a writer. And then I got a degree in healthcare management. And I worked in healthcare for a while. I was a missionary in Russia. And then I came back and somebody cornered me and said, there's this family in Ukraine. The father was a pastor in the Soviet Union, and they had all this persecution. They have an amazing story, and you need to write it. And I said, no, I'm not a writer. Well, this person was persistent. I wrote the book and fell in love with the process of writing. And that's where I got started.
Wow. How many books have you written now?
Let's see, I have the three in the series. Sting of the Scorpion is the third. I've written that first one, Beyond the Rapids. And I wrote a little nonfiction called Read Me Before You Write, which really should be called The 1001 Mistakes I Made Writing My First Book. And there you have it. And I'm finishing my fourth novel.
Oh, you've been busy. How long does it take you to finish a book?
Well, the first one took almost 8 or 9 years. And my first novel took about 8 years because I really didn't know what I was doing. But I've been able, this last one, Sting of the Scorpion, took about a year. And the last one will be about a year.
How many books are going to be in the Outlawed Myths series?
The fourth will be the final book.
It will. Are you going to start something new?
I actually have something already new in the works. I've been world building for it, which to me is the most fun part of the whole thing because I get to read about other cultures, look at pictures of other lands. And yeah, I've been world building it. I have the story pretty much outlined for the first one. And I'm hoping to get going on that one this summer.
Is there anything you do to prepare yourself to sit down and write these kind of stories? Because come on, they're scary. And it's the human psyche. So I thought maybe you had more of like a psychology background, the way that people interact with people.
Well, interestingly, my undergraduate degree was child development. So I do draw on that. And then I was in management for a while. And management, you do need to use a lot of psychology to understand what your employees are doing and why they're doing what they're doing and trying to figure out how to manage them the best. So I did draw on that somewhat in this.
You could really say it with the main character. How do you pronounce her name? Is it Damara?
Demira.
Danira. And how do you pronounce her brother's name?
Her brother is Sizyan.
Sizzlin.
I would probably not name a character something like that again because it is hard to say.
That's funny. Well, you could see where she was getting drawn into it and why she needed it. There's so many things going against her. There's a possibility of, rape, of being married off, all these things. And the the culture of having her brother choose somebody for, was
Mm-hmm.
awfully scary. But it was just so well drawn out. The things that you would go through if you were in that predicament.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was really trying to show somebody who descended in on a bad path, but why they would do it and why somebody would say, yeah, I understand why she's doing that. She's still wrong, but I understand what's driving her. And I also wanted people to see her brother, who is the bossy big brother, but he really does have her best interests at heart. And his struggles of watching her do that and not knowing how to stop her.
Exactly. You can only say so much to people and
Mm-hmm.
try to influence them away from doing something. But
Right.
yeah, I'm really wondering what's going to happen with her. There are a lot of Asian influences too.
Right.
Have you traveled to Asia?
I have been to Thailand and Cambodia and India. I actually pulled some more influences from China and Japan. I had many friends that worked in those countries, and some of their stories influenced it. Right. So I used that. And I used my travels to Russia for the one culture, the Azolians, who were in the north, and borrowed a few elements from that as well.
Yeah, that fits. That actually makes sense. And then tell me a little bit more about some of your hobbies that might have influenced how the characters reacted to certain things in their surroundings.
Well, in
So,
Sting of the Scorpion, oh, go ahead.
uh, no, because you had written that your your new hobby is catching
Yes.
lizards and
Right.
bugs.
Bugs. Right. I have three little grandsons, aged 6 and then 2-year-old twins. And the oldest of them loves to catch lizards and bugs. And that's not my thing, but he will chase them for hours. His little brothers will toddle along behind him. And he has so much joy in it. And I started to see that as through a child's eyes, all the wonder of it, which maybe it's why I like fantasy so much, because it adds a wonderful magical influence. So I think that's why in Sting of the Scorpion, they keep getting overrun by bugs, because I'm kind of like, ooh, when my grandson is picking up his bugs and he's loving them. So I think that's why bugs were top of mind when I wrote the book.
Why scorpions?
Why scorpions? Well, in the other books, some people have dragonfly amulets and they're powered through a whole different source. And it was kind of a balance to it. And also the idea that this power, when they use it, it stings. It actually hurts. The original title of the book was Sting of Power, and it played off that idea. But right, a scorpion stings you if you get too close, and that's the same thing with these amulets.
Yeah. It was really scary in parts, and I was like, no. Have you been to Egypt?
No, I haven't. That's on my list, but I would love to go there.
And what are the different themes that you explore in each of the books?
In Sting of the Scorpion, we talked about how it's this idea of power, and I was really looking at, you may have a worthwhile goal, but what are you willing to do to achieve it? Do the ends justify the means, is another way to put it. Would you do anything to achieve it, or is there some line you shouldn't cross? So that was that idea. In the first book, Flight of the Spark, it was all about freedom versus safety. That book takes place in a different area. It's people who fled this endless war. So their whole thing was, we are going to have peace, we are going to have safety, and we are going to have fairness, and we're making rules to make sure it happens. And woe to you if you break the rules. And this girl finds out that a lot of what they were telling her about being safe and being free was a lie. And her whole thing is, how much do you give up to be safe? How much of your freedom are you willing to give up? And then the next one, Flicker of the Flame, it really brings about the idea of fairness and who decides what is fair, who defines what is fair. Is it the people in power who decide that fairness is whatever keeps them in power, or is fairness something else?
And the last book?
The fourth one is about, wow, I don't know if I can encapsulate it, but I think it's about the power of words, that you can use words for whatever you want them to mean, and that words travel faster than any weapon, and that you can use words as a weapon.
That's a good point. I like how the theme ran through the story, and while parts of it are very dark, it was always lined with hope. Kept hoping she'd understand what she was really giving up to get where she was going.
Right.
And how much was it worth? How much pain do you really want to inflict on yourself?
Right. And her brother, I really, some of my early readers said, oh, he should just give up on her. And I didn't want to do that. He never gives up on her. He never stops believing that he can bring her back. And that's why I ended it with him thinking that, yes, we will make this right.
Yeah, and I like the way you covered preconceptions or stereotypical things about different groups of people, and how they, it takes traveling to overcome those, and it takes traveling to understand other cultures and see them, and take the good with the bad. I mean,
Right.
There's good and bad everywhere.
And that was one thing I learned from having live in overseas and traveling, is just because they do something a way I don't expect them to do, it doesn't make it wrong. It's just different. And they have a reason for it. There were many things in Russia that just made me crazy. And then when I finally understood why they did that, it made perfect sense. I might not have done it that way, but it made sense. There was a logic to it.
So did you live in Russia?
I was there for 7 years, yeah.
Wow. Can you give us some idea of things that we may, as Americans, maybe, or other cultures, that we may perceive, especially now with everything going on, about Russians that you found surprising, and then explain why?
Right. One thing that was very prominent when I was there, when I lived there in the 90s, was the fact that all the stores closed between 2 and 3. That was dinner break. You couldn't buy anything. And it just made me crazy from my American perspective of, you need to be there for customer service. You need to make sales. You need to do this. And it just made me crazy until somebody explained to me that the dinner break, people couldn't usually go home for lunch for that hour. It would take up their whole hour to just get home because of public transportation. Take too long to get home and back. They wouldn't have time to eat, and they'd be worn out when they get back. So a lot of these places would bring in a hot meal. But if you didn't eat at the same time, you wouldn't be able to eat, or you'd eat some cold, nasty food. So it made sense from that perspective that they were taking care of their employees. Now, that started to shift after I was there, and I think they were making other arrangements. But once I understood the logic, I wasn't so annoyed by it, and I just realized I had to be the one to remember to get my shopping done before 2 or wait till after 3. And another thing is, they really talked about how they liked strong leaders. They really admire strong leaders. And one person even described it, we need a strong fist to rule our country. And that's not how we would explain a leader. That's not what we would look for, but that's in their culture, deeply entwined in their culture.
And what about people that were speaking out? Did you meet a lot of people that had a completely different viewpoint of their government at the time?
In the 90s, it was kind of like the Wild West. Yeltsin was in power. People were really exploring a lot of freedom. But at the same time, the economy was in shambles. So people were very free at that time to speak out. And many were calling for a return to communism, which was really a call for a return to stability. And many people liked the freedom. It was all over the board.
Well, that must have
But
been a unique experience.
that was that was life changing. I came back and I felt like I was a completely different person.
But I think you do have to live in other countries for a period of time to just understand the mindset, why they do
Hmm.
things the way they do. And,
Hmm.
because it becomes the overall character of the country and the culture.
Right, right, absolutely. And even learning the language. In Russian, there's no word for privacy. It's not a concept.
It's not?
It's not a I mean, I think it is now with all of the interaction with Americans in the West, but there is no word for privacy. So that's something in using language really tells you how people think.
What about food? How is the food?
It was wonderful. Um, it depended. If somebody invited you to dinner, you were in for a treat. People made the most exquisite food, wonderful soups and stews, and beautiful presentation. They told me I didn't know how to cut a cucumber because I didn't do it as precisely perfect, and they'd lay it out with all this chopped herbs on top of it. The food could be delightful. They also had, you could buy on the street these little things called pierogi, which is like kind of like a very small calzone, the
Hmm.
pieces of dough folded over to make a half moon, but they'd stuff it with either meat or fruit or potatoes or cabbage. And it was kind of like a fast food item. You could walk around with that. And I put that into the books because I thought that was a great thing to have.
Food was a big theme.
Yeah, I tried to use food to really just show the culture and also show the attitudes. I had the one scene in Sting of the Scorpion where Demira did not want to take this food from this person from this other culture. She didn't like them. She was brought up to not trust them, and it turned out it was perfectly fine. It was good food, and that was a way that her brother got over the prejudice toward those people.
That's true too. Food does win people over. Are you a good
It,
are you a good cook as well?
I like to think so. My husband never complains, so.
Oh, that's good. So then you must be a very good cook. Well, it was a really exciting read. I really enjoyed it. Just the whole concept of growing up with learning to discriminate against other people, and how they overcame it, or some didn't really overcome it.
Mhm.
But you did such a wonderful job of weaving it in. It wasn't blatant, it was just laced in there so perfectly.
Well,
That
thank
just
you. I
drew you
appreciate
into the story where you were like, I can't put it down. What's happening?
it. Well, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I tried to really show that, these people, part of their prejudice was they had had no contact with these other people or very limited, or they'd heard stories about them. And that's what they based their prejudices on. And it was when they came in contact, especially Scythian, when he came in contact with these other people, he started to think, not only are they not so bad, but they're actually admirable, wonderful people.
Yeah. And I liked how the women were sometimes the bad guy. Well, because you really don't see it a lot in fantasy. They're always trying to make women the superheroes and stuff, but, not all women are always so kind and sweet.
Right. And that was part of my thinking with Demira is she started off with great intentions. She really had compassion on everybody who was suffering from this endless war. And at first she's thinking, I'm going to sacrifice myself and end this. And it didn't quite turn out the way she planned.
Yeah, no, not really.
And that happens to a lot of us.
I know. Well, her nemesis was pretty evil too.
Yeah, he was very Machiavellian. I mean, just he was going to use whoever came his way to achieve whatever he wanted, and it was all about him.
I'm really interested in finding out how he survived as long as he did, though.
Yeah, well, he was fairly disciplined about not using the amulets as as much as Demira did. He pushed her to use them much more than he used them. And the person that died before Demira came into the story that used to use that one amulet of power was a Czech to Nishio. The two of them made sure each other followed the rules, so they didn't burn themselves out, so to speak. But when Demira came on the scene, Nishio saw her as his tool, and he used her for all it was worth.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing so much about yourself and how you created this wonderful story.
Well, thank you. It's been a great pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, I enjoyed talking to you too. And I really loved the story.
Thank you.
It was fast paced. It had unexpected twists and turns, cultural values. It was fun to read. I really couldn't put it down. Oh, and you did win an award for Flight of the Spark, right?
Right. Flight of the Spark was my debut novel, and it won a silver medal from the Reader's Favorite for young adult epic fantasy. And I was just thrilled by that. That was so validating after all those years of work that somebody judged it and found it to be that good. It's easy to think, well, people are just humoring me when they say that. But that really helped me think, okay, maybe I have figured out how to do this.
Well, with all your readers, you must see that now. I suspect that authors are pretty hard on themselves, so.
Yeah, it's easy to say, well, that's just their opinion, or I've done it once, I could never do it again, that kind of thing. But yeah.
Well, you've done it again. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Until next time, keep asking questions. And if you want a great book that'll totally keep your attention, Sting of the Scorpion will not let you down. We'll see you soon.